The Madsen Newton 10. This is something you might not expect. What's up everyone, I'm Jack Fossett, welcome to the channel and welcome to this demo and review of the Madsen Newton 10. This is a Champ inspired amp, but it's got some really cool twists and a really unique tone, and as they like to say, it has an old soul but with modern refinements. So let's start out with some tone here that we're going to talk about a little bit here, all the things that this can do. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy. So this is a really cool handmade amplifier made in the USA. This is not a sponsored review. This amp is just passing through and I wanted to share this with you. It's from a really cool small company, really great guy who runs it, and incredible attention to detail, you know, all the things that you might expect from someone actually hand building you an amplifier as opposed to something coming off some degree of assembly line or whatnot. So this starts with the idea of being like a champ. Now, we talked about doing a review of this particular one, obviously because I've done a lot of videos of the Fender Champ. Now, the modern Fender Champ, which is still hand-wired and made kind of very much like the originals were. The Fender Champ is just a thing in and of itself, and I love that little amp. It's a really cool, amazing little amp. It's not a one-trick pony, but it does have kind of a narrower or a more focused, let's say, sort of spectrum of tones that it's able to do than many other amplifiers. Also, a one-trick pony is not necessarily the worst thing in the world. You know, it may be the one trick that you want your pony to do. So if you get an amplifier that just does that one thing, but you just love that one thing, then, you know, I think it's kind of a false salesman thing to suggest that everything needs to be the most versatile thing in the world. You know, not every amp needs to be a super amp that can do everything. Not every guitar needs to be a super Strat or whatnot that can do everything. You know, sometimes if you just get something that gets you that great tone that you want, then that's good enough. This one does take the idea of a champ and it sort of pushes it a little bit further and opens it up and kind of gives it, what's really cool about it is it has sort of the spirit of a champ, but again, with a little bit more for people who might be worried about the limitations of a Champ. So notably, what's different about this one is it has the output transformer of a Tweed Princeton, and on top of that, it also has a 10-inch Celestion Creamback speaker in it. So you've actually got 10 watts here instead of 5 watts. Now that makes a big difference in amount of headroom that you have available. It makes a difference in kind of the character of gain that you can get from this. This has 3 tubes in it. It has a 5Y3, a 6V6, and a 12AX7. It also has a 3-way voicing switch. Now, what you've heard so far is with it cranked, and you could hear I was using the volume knob a little bit. I was using my Gibson Les Paul Jr., which is loaded with the Righteous Sound Pickups King Street P90. And I thought, Les Paul Jr. and the Champ, that's kind of a match made in heaven. So I thought that would be a really cool one to share with you to start it off and do kind of the classic overdriven small amp thing, right? But the inspiration for this particular amp was actually Julian Lage. And I think in modern days, in big part because of YouTube and just sort of the accessibility of information and, artists talking about their tones and all kinds of things, the Champs have also honestly been used probably just as much for their clean tone over the years as they have been for their drive tone. And they have this warm, silky, jazzy thing that they do, can be bluesy, but because there's kind of a, they don't have that big open sort of like transient rich sound like a bigger, higher wattage amp would. That top end is sort of like tamped down a little bit. It's not there. It's not like it's a dull amp sounding, but it really kind of, again, it's like it's got that natural compression. Now the downside about that with Champs is that Champs do also have a sweet spot, and again, this is kind of that narrow range of tone that you're talking about. When you get a Champ totally driven, it's like, yeah, you get some of those cool, Clapton 70s tones, but it's kind of, the best way I heard it is sort of like the amp is collapsing in on itself into mid-range, right? So, all the wideness that you would get of your tonal spectrum sort of just collapses into this little mid-rangey punch and snarl. Again, something that we love from the Champs, but it is a sound, and if you're not into that sound, it's kind of not what you want. What's cool about this one is it's almost like halfway between a Champ and the next level. If you're familiar with some of the old Fender Tweed amps, there were a whole lot of them, that many of which did not get famous. But also, for instance, you could say this is almost like halfway between a Fender Champ and a Fender Pro Junior. That would be kind of a safe comparison, right? It gives you more openness, but it still gives you that cool compressed punch with a lot of mid-range. And with the voicing switches, which also give you options for, more headroom and just kind of a different character of tone, you've got a lot of versatility with a little more volume. You've also got the ability to use it in more situations. Now, obviously, something like this, you would still need to mic it up in a band situation. So I'm not going to say you could, take this out, with a band and do it unmiked. But you could set it up with a mic. You could get some really cool tones using it live. You could get some great tones in the studio where you don't have to, have everyone kind of, tiptoe around in socks and things because the microphones have to be up so loud that they'll pick up anything. That's particularly useful with the clean tone. There's a famous interview, was it David Cobb? Am I getting that right? Who talked about getting the key to a great clean tone was setting a Champ really, really low, around 3. The problem with that is that it's just so quiet that, you have to have your mic pre's up really high and everything. It's not that that's detrimental, but this one gives you more wiggle room. It gives you, again, more headroom, little bit more transient, but still kind of in that Champ realm. But it not so much that it's going to just kind of you need to have everything pulled way down or pushed way up. I guess pushed way up is the thing. Now, this has a hand-painted chassis. Again, just incredible attention to detail. It's not a budget amp, but, comparatively, it's really not that bad. Now, I am going to link to the website for the price. I'm not going to say the price in the video, and the reason I'm not going to do that is because if you're watching this video 3-4 years from now and, prices had to be bumped, I don't want to set anyone kind of down the wrong path. So I will link to the website and everything where you can find prices and also ask for your own custom builds and things like that. And that's kind of out of respect to the challenges of people running a small company. Prices can't always be standard based on availability of parts or just how the world is going at any given moment. So you've just heard it in this sort of classic small Fender, you know, grip and rip, plug and slug, tube amp style. Just let it get going, let it cook. But what I also want to do now is play you, particularly emphasize some edge of breakup and clean tones, which is I think where this one really shines. And, you know, again, comparatively to a champ, for people who are thinking about a champ, but you're kind of like, I just don't know, this one might sort of be the perfect middle ground for something that gives you a little bit more, but still in that realm. So we're going to switch over to a Telecaster now and play it with a bunch of different Telecaster tones. It's a Tele loaded with Porter custom Tele pickups. And at the end, I am also going to hit it with a pedal, again, because it's got a little bit more headroom, a little bit more openness, and a bigger speaker. It's a 10-inch speaker as opposed to an 8-inch speaker like you would get in the Champ. Because of all that, it's going to give you a little bit more freedom to do things like experiment with pedals. So I'm going to hit it with a Keeley Super Fat Mod, which is a nice big open sounding drive, and it really meshed well with this amplifier. So we're going to do a clean tone, we're going to do an edge of breakup tone, and then we're going to also do a clean tone and then stack the pedal onto it. So let us know what you think in the comments. What do you think of this idea of kind of like staying sort of one foot in the path of like vintage inspiration, but also trying to move it forward and respond to what players' needs are? Check out Madsen Amps, and again, hey, you know, there's a lot of cool small companies out there making great gear, and think about checking those companies out like Madsen, you know, instead of always just getting kind of the big brand stuff. I'm Jack Fossett. Stick around for some more tone. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video.